Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by Mr. John Harris, of course. And yeah, we're back today talking Week 7 reactions. Got lots to go over, obviously. And obviously, before we do so, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe if you're, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on our podcast or any, to the podcast audio itself. But yeah, John, let's dive right into Week 7. Let's not take forever on my car ride home. That was not fun. Anyways, Texas traffic, by the way, one of the worst. Has to be up there. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure. I think you mentioned where I don't want to say where you're living at, but where you're at's pretty bad. And everyone knows I'm in San Antonio, but good luck finding me if you don't know me. But yeah, it's terrible.
I mean, I'm in Austin, and it's pretty bad too. Austin was not built for the amount of people that now live here.
Yeah. Whoever thought a good idea to put a major 1604 loop, have it only 2 lanes. Great job, because now we have to do construction on those. So that's fun. So yeah, if you work from home, like my significant other, congrats to you. Commuting is terrible. But anyways, New Orleans Saints, they had to commute over to the Arizona Cardinals on Thursday, and they're probably wishing they didn't, because it was not a great game for them. Although there were some bright spots. Arizona pulls out the win here, 42-34 over New Orleans. Although it was a high-scoring game, especially for the Cardinals, Kyler Murray was having some spats with Cliff early in the game, but they pull it out. So, John, what were your thoughts in regards to this Thursday nighter? Definitely more exciting than some of our recent ones.
Yeah, definitely the best Thursday nighter we've had probably since that Chiefs-Chargers game in Week 2. So at least that was nice. I mean, the bar was set incredibly low the last 2 weeks, so it was going to be kind of hard for this one to be that much worse. So at least it was a really high-scoring, fun game. In this one, honestly, I say this with a grain of salt, because obviously it's going to come off a little bit dumb because they lost, but it felt like watching the game, the Saints are the better team, but those 2 crucial pick sixes at the very end of the first half, that's what lost them the game. That was the momentum swinger. And then the second half, the Saints still came out and they looked better. They put up 20 points in the second half compared to the Cardinals only putting up 14, which the Cardinals putting up 14 is still a good amount. But if those 2 pick sixes don't happen, maybe New Orleans just punts or they get a field goal or something along those lines, the Saints win this game, and they win it pretty comfortably. So I don't know. The Cardinals, obviously I do want to give them props because Marco Wilson's pick 6 was great. Isaiah Simmons was a very good catch from him, but honestly I was just really shocked that Andy Dalton made a bad throw like that. Because usually Andy, he's got some pretty decent decision making. I don't know, he's not like a game manager, but he can kind of play that role for the most part. So I don't know. I felt like the Saints were the better team on the night, but the Cardinals, they got the win and they did what it takes to win, and that's really what matters. Obviously, the Kyler Murray clip of him yelling at Cliff to calm down, and I don't know what he said after that, but it seemed like it was a very heated discussion. I think that what I'm assuming it is that Cliff called a pass play there, and they're within the 5-yard line, and Kyler's saying, let's just run the ball and score, because this Cardinals team has been one of the worst red zone scoring teams in the entire NFL, and the easiest way to score in the red zone is to just simply run the ball into the end zone. And I know that you don't have James Conner, so maybe that was Cliff's thought process, but ultimately, I don't know. This game didn't move the needle for me. I know that some people felt like, because the Cliff being fired stuff was really building going into this week, and then they win and people feel like, okay, they're getting closer to 500. Maybe this rights the ship. Hopkins comes back. He looked really good. So maybe that, fixes everything. To me, it didn't, because almost nobody else got involved in the offensive game plan. Rondale Moore, they continue to put him on the outside when other people are injured. Robbie Anderson, obviously, he just got traded there, so they didn't really fully use him yet. Rondale Moore, when he's on the outside, doesn't look that great. And when he goes in the slot, he dominates. He leads. He's one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL in terms of creating separation. But then when you put him on the outside, he's having these games 1 catch for 31 yards. It was a great catch. It was a great play, but he had no impact outside of that play. And then they ran an end zone corner fade to Rondale Moore at one point. there's just some questionable decision making, I think, from this offensive play calling staff, not even just in terms of the plays, but the way that they're aligning and utilizing certain players. And I don't think that this game really changed any of that stuff for me. And then on the other end for the Saints, I don't have too much to say outside of the fact that they don't have their first round pick because they went and traded it to Philly last year to go up and get Chris Olave. And this is getting real concerning.
So I'm with you for the most part. I'm glad you went on about Arizona's offense. It saved me a lot of time because it's nothing game breaking. Like you put it perfectly, and I'm pretty much gonna end it almost after this. Like those 2 pick sixes, it was night because then the Saints, their strength is, hey, we had a really good offensive line. We kind of want to run the ball, especially with their defense. Missing Marshall. You can tell they kind of missed Marshawn Lattimore this game. He wasn't active and probably would have helped against DeAndre Hopkins, which hey. Good comeback game for DeAndre, but I'm still jury's out. If he'll be a comeback all the way. Because he did do PEDs. Anyways, but yeah, those 2 pick sixes were killer, and kind of just played into the Cardinals' hands, especially defensively, because we know they do a lot of creative blitzes and such. So, they just put him behind the 8 ball. Couldn't really recover from that, and yeah, still, I'm like you mentioned, still red flags with the Arizona offense for me too. I still have major concerns because take those 2 pick sixes away, it's 28 points, and also there's another reception. They had some short fields, so this win really goes more to the defense of Arizona than I would say the offense. Kyler only threw for 200 yards and barely over 200 yards and 1 touchdown, and Benjamin broke off a big run or 2, but that was really about it for their offense. So we'll have to see what they can do against better competition. And once again, the Saints, they're dealing with a bunch of injuries. Andy Dalton's still out here. Jameis is, they're still missing 2 wide receivers and, some other guys. So hopefully the Saints can get healthy so we can, so they can make a run because they are a talented team. And like you mentioned, they don't have a first round pick. So kind of have the incentive to win anyway. That was pretty cut and dry for the Cardinals and the Saints as the Cardinals get the win there. Now we move to the Sunday games. Gonna start at Cincinnati where the Bengals got back on track, it seems. The Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase connection still goes on, but the Tyler Boyd game happened. He had a really good game. And for the Falcons, it was kind of like a falling back to earth. Rest in peace, the cover Kings. They finally don't cover. Unfortunately, I think, did we both pick against, or was it only I that picked against Atlanta last week? I think you rode them last week, right?
I've been riding. Yeah, you picked the Niners last week.
Okay,
I've been riding
because I got off the train 1 week too early. Anyways, Bengals take care of things. They win 35-17. John. What were your thoughts in regards to this? I would dare say domination by the Bengals.
I don't have much to say about the Bengals. Great game. They took advantage of the Atlanta Falcons' weaknesses. Atlanta was without multiple starters in their secondary, and not that they have the greatest secondary by any means, but they were without multiple starters, and we saw Joe Burrow almost threw for 500 yards. And you got Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase, who were both top 5 this week in terms of overall production at the receiver spot. I think maybe they were actually top 2. So... And then even T. Higgins, he has a quiet day compared to those two, put up 5 catches for 93 yards. So they just shredded the Falcons. So I don't really have much to say about that. And I've gone on this rant before. So if you're tired of hearing me talk about the Falcons and their offense, you can skip ahead in the video. But I something has to change. I know that Desmond Ridder is a young quarterback and maybe he's not ready and whatever. But this game to me felt unexcusable. Either the fact that either Marcus Mariota is completely inept when it comes to throwing and the coaching staff knows it, and so they're choosing not to throw because they know that he's not going to have success, or the coaching staff is terrible. And honestly, I don't think, the longer this has gone on, I really don't think it's Arthur Smith, because everyone knew that Mariota was a stopgap quarterback. He was a pretty decent backup who could be utilized in those ways the Raiders used him. But nobody really thought that Marcus Mariota was going to be a starter for any team that was going to have any sort of success. And I know they've won some games here and there, but they were down the entire game. The Bengals went up by a touchdown, and from that moment on, the Bengals never relinquished that 7-point lead, and they only grew it. So for most of that game, they were actually down multiple scores, and they threw the ball 13 times. Over the last 3 weeks, they have thrown the ball 38% of the time. They are not even hitting 40% of their plays as throws. So, like, I just don't understand what they're, like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. Like, this is not a way that you play offense. I've already talked about Kyle Pitts and Drake London, so I'm not going to go too long on that. But they combined for 4 catches for 18 yards. That's inexcusable. Like, these guys are so incredibly talented. And that's not because, like, anybody else was having great games. Damiere Byrd had 1 catch for 75 yards. And Olamide Zaccheaus had 3 catches for 31 yards. They completed 8 passes. Like, this is pitiful. This is honestly pitiful. So I truly think something needs to change. If it's the coaching staff, then the ownership needs to say, like, intervene and tell them to start throwing the ball. But at this point, I don't think it's the coaching staff. I think it's Marcus Mariota. And I'm not saying that, like, I don't want to put all the blame on him, but at the same time, the coaching staff and the front office, how do they not know that this was potentially going to happen at some point and try to look elsewhere for a better option? Because considering their record, they have talent. Like, they're winning games without utilizing their 2 best offensive players. So imagine if they had a half-decent quarterback who could utilize those guys. Like, they might be sitting with, like, 5 wins right now and looking like they could win this division pretty handily. So I don't really understand what's going on in Atlanta, but something needs to change. To me, it's the quarterback spot. I feel like if you're going to throw the ball 13 times and run the ball most of the game, I don't see why Desmond Ridder can't do that. Like, these are not hard throws. These are such easy throws. 13 pass attempts. He had 124 yards. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it. I was not even high on Desmond Ridder, but the one thing I praised him for was his legs, and that's really all the value you're getting out of Marcus Mariota anyway. So I don't see why Desmond Ridder can't do that same thing, and you throw him out there, you let him learn some stuff. And if Desmond Ridder truly isn't ready and you want to take it slow, then go get somebody else who can throw the ball at least, because as of right now, the way this division is looking, the Falcons could win this division. So at least try to, like, make the most out of this year and not just have a year where, once again, we say you win 9 games and it's a waste because you got Marcus Mariota, and come playoff time, you're going to get exposed just like this because you're going to play a team who can throw the ball and you can't keep up. And you're choosing not to keep up. Like, once again, they're trailing 3 scores the entire game, and they threw the ball like 40% of the time. It's pitiful. It's really pitiful.
I want to respond to that because I just want to say I agree with you. I just want to tell you a little story. So I think this is like the Falcons mindset. So last week, I think it was last week, we had my company had a meeting. Like everyone came into our branch. And I'm not sure you were sort of subject to many meetings, but of course there's an icebreaker. And me being a socially awkward person, I did not want to be a part of this icebreaker. And it's like, it was rock, paper, scissors, but it was not. They just changed, the symbols. So my goal is, okay, I'm just going to pick, I forgot what it was, but I'm just going to pick rock. I'm going to pick the same one every time because I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want it because he had to stand up and, like, be in front of everybody. And then, like, it's like survival to the fittest. Anyways, but of course, kind of like, I feel like the Falcons were me in the fact that, like, let's be honest, like, our preseason expectations were they weren't going to be very good. But then but I think too. So sorry, let me finish my story. So yeah, I ended up winning a couple times. I almost got to the end, and I literally just kept kicking the same one over and over and over again, the same thing, and it was terrible. I was like, someone just beat me. I don't want to stand up in front of everybody because that's what I was doing. All these people, I just want to go back, sit in the back in the corner, and just do me. I just feel like that's what the Falcons are like doing. Like, they're kind of trying to build the blocks of how they want to win, because it was kind of like similar to last year. Okay, we want to run the ball heavily and then pass. But yeah, I mean, it's just I just think they're secretly kind of tanking ish. I don't know. Like, obviously, I think Arthur Smith's trying to build a winning culture. Like, hey, this is how we want to play football, but we also don't really want to win too many games because, we like you said, John, we don't want Marcus Mariota as our guy. So Yeah, maybe they're trying to keep Kyle Pitts and Drake London fresh. Because Drake London had one target too, by the way.
One target.
One target. And I'm glad, by the way, in one of my fantasy leagues, I benched Drake London, so I'm glad I did. And I'm getting to the point where I might have to drop him. But anyways, I'm with you. It's mind boggling. Because
the tough part for me is okay, if you truly don't want Marcus Mariota and you're kind of wanting to lose games, then why would you not play Desmond Ridder?
That's what I don't understand. Maybe
I know he's incredibly raw, but you're throwing the ball 13 times. You can't tell me that if New England can make Bailey Zappi, a quarterback who was picked after Desmond Ridder, if they can make him have success with the stuff that they do, you can't tell me that the QB that you picked ahead of Bailey Zappi and is potentially going to be your long-term answer can't throw the ball 13 times and have some sort of success. A lot of these Marcus Mariota throws are gimme throws. Kyle Pitts hit all his throws. None of them went for over 5 yards. He had 9 yards on 3 catches. These are just quickly throwing it to the flat. I don't get it.
Those are the throws you give your unathletic second or third tight end. That's more of a blocking decoy as opposed to Kyle Pitts, who we all can agree is a specimen, a freak of nature. You know what I mean? So yeah, obviously like I mentioned a couple of weeks too. Like you saying, I think this is more just further proof they don't believe in Mariota. But yeah, everything else, just the pieces of this puzzle don't fit. So who the heck knows what's going on in Atlanta? Other thing I wanted to mention outside of what the heck's going on with their offense is you already alluded to, had some injuries in their secondary, and no AJ Terrell. That's going to hurt. And they played a lot of man at times. And obviously you play man on the Bengals, you're just helping them out because that's one-on-ones for Jamar Chase and all these guys. So, who the heck knows what's going on in Atlanta, but like I said, maybe they're kind of doing what I'm hoping my Spurs are doing. It's hey, we won a couple of games, especially at first. We're not obviously tanking. And then maybe, someone the past week, maybe they said, okay, now's when we're taking. Because, this last time I'm going to say it, and last one we'll mention it, but they were down double-digit score, down multiple touchdowns, and you only throw 13 times. There's no good explanation for that. As much, it's not like they're gashing in the run game. So we got to stay patient with the run game. They got no offense to Tyler Algier, but that Tyler Algier, it's not like you have some stud running back that's just ripping off runs and you're killing them that way. So,
and also to all the Falcons fans who have been in our comment section last week because of my critiques of the way this team is working, you can't use the excuse of, well, we're trying to win games now. Because that was the excuse that was being used for why they were running so much and not utilizing their weapons through the air. That excuse is out the window because down multiple scores the entire day, and they still refuse to pass.
Yeah, so we'll see what the heck goes on in Atlanta. Like I said, it makes sense if they're to kind of take it because there's also no Calvin Ridley. So, hey, maybe next year, okay, we'll hit the reset button next year. Our line's solid. We obviously got Ridley, London, Pitts, and we get Cordarrelle back, and our defense is looking solid. But I'm with you, John. That's not your year, Falcons. But anyways, speaking of Arthur Smith, we're going to his former tenure, and that is the Tennessee Titans as they pull out the win over the Indianapolis Colts, 19-10. Oh, by the way, sorry. Did you have a baller of the week on for Cincy?
Oh, right. I almost forgot about that because of my rant. Shout out Joe Burrow. The guy had over 500 total yards of offense, 481 through the air. He had 20 on the ground rushing, a rushing touchdown, 3 passing touchdowns. He was 34-42.
Ugh,
the guy. If you had him in fantasy, you're loving what he just did this week. And if you played against him, I'm sorry because the odds are you probably lost.
Yeah, those like Madden, you put the skill down the rookie numbers, and you just you're just going to town. Anyways, now we go to the next game, and that is the Tennessee Titans. They beat the Indianapolis Colts 19-10. I'll start first for this one. Basically this is the Tennessee formula. We mentioned this kind of what Atlanta's trying to do. This is the Tennessee Titans formula for success. We're gonna ride Derrick Henry. They really did. I'm trying to pull up the carries right now. Sorry, but play good defense too on top of that. Tannehill makes a few timely throws. Yeah, Henry, 30 carries for 128 yards. Like, not many other, I don't think any other running backs are getting like 30 carries a game. So, and especially if they're not being nearly as efficient as Derek was. But yeah, then for the Colts, I mean, so sorry, let me keep going with Tennessee. That's their formula, is just play good defense. They had a pick six. That's pretty much was that their only touchdown in the game? That was. So a bunch of field goals. Offense does enough to, keep drives alive. But yeah, the real concern is here, obviously, the Colts. I'll start with some good news. I've liked that Paris Campbell's kind of had a resurgence, or not even a resurgence, just a surgence. He's a guy I liked coming out of the draft. In case you don't know, he was technically taken before DK Metcalf, if I remember. He was in that DK Metcalf, AJ Brown draft. And I liked him. I liked the spot he was in, and as well this for sure, John. I mean, in our fantasy league, he's been passed around in our dynasty league because he's a guy that has potential, but has just not stayed healthy. So kudos to him. He's been able to stay healthy, and has been showcasing his abilities. He's had a pretty solid year. One of the few bright spots in Indy. But yeah, obviously the big thing is that Matt Ryan seems like we've reached the end per se. Well, I mean, we'll see what goes down the line, but they made the quarterback change. We'll talk more about that in a second. But yeah, I mean, Matt Ryan, this line hasn't done him as many favors. I mean, this line isn't as good as advertised, but on top of that, I mean, he's just not athletic enough to manipulate the pocket like he used to, even when he does have time, and he's just struggling to push the ball downfield. So Tennessee, they're all over that. They probably knew what to expect, and that's why they had a lot of great success here. 10-19 seems like it was close, but just from watching the game, I feel like you mentioned, kind of with the Saints, except the Saints lost, but Tennessee was the better team here, and it wasn't really close in that aspect. But John, what were your thoughts in regards to this AFC South matchup?
Well, I'll start by apologizing to the Titans because I think I kind of gave up on them a little too early based on the way they started. I was even potentially talking about them going 0-4. They're now sitting at 4-2, pretty comfortably in the lead in this division. So I will own up to my L on that one.
The pod curse lives on.
Yeah. And I think that's probably just because of the resurgence of Derrick Henry, right? Like, the guy has been the key to their offense, and first couple weeks wasn't doing the greatest, but now he's fully back ingrained. 30 carries against the division rival and gets the win. And they sweep the Colts here, which is really big because the Colts, even after this loss, are still 3-3-1, very close in terms of the division race. But this tiebreaker is going to make it really tough because now they have almost no margin for error. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So good win for the Titans. I don't really have much to say about them. For the Colts, I don't really understand their game plan. I feel like they have such a talented running back in Jonathan Taylor. They have such a talented offensive line. And I know the offensive line hasn't been the greatest, but Jonathan Taylor got 10 carries in this game, and he averaged almost 6 yards a carry. And it wasn't like one of those games where, he has 58 yards, but like 45 of them came on one play. Like, his longest run was only 14 yards. So he was grinding out pretty consistent yardage every time he touched the ball. And they still just didn't really get him involved in the game plan. And I don't understand that, because even when you look at the box score, they were never out of this game. I mean, going into halftime, yeah, they were down 13-0, but still, like, you could have ran the ball more in that first half because he only had like a handful of carries in that first half. And then in the second half, you start out and you were the first team to score. So now you're only down by 6, and that's still the third quarter. So there's still a lot of game left. You can still run the ball. But a lot of the times on these drives, they would start out with a run on the first play, and then they would instantly abandon it after that. They would just let Matt Ryan throw the ball, and he throws it 44 times. And that just does not make sense to me. Meanwhile, you got the Titans on the other side running it 30 times with Derrick Henry. It seemed like the Colts needed to do the same thing with Jonathan Taylor. So that leads me into the Matt Ryan benching. Obviously, if you haven't seen the news, Matt Ryan, recently traded to the Colts in the offseason, has been officially benched, not just for this next week, but for the remainder of the season for, I believe, 5th round draft pick 2 years ago, Sam Ehlinger out of the University of Texas. Maybe it was 6th round, 5th or 6th round. Anyway, Yeah, late in the draft. So Matt Ryan has been officially been benched. What are your thoughts on the benching?
We just talked about Atlanta, about how you say you want to win, but you're not really showing me it. I think that's what the Colts are showing. So, like, look, we do. I mean, the Colts are going for the win. They do want to, like you said, they're still not that far behind in the division race. And I think, we're just seeing that Matt Ryan is kind of past his expiration date. And I think, I see a lot of talk shows and podcasts I listen to too. They mentioned like Tom Brady's kind of spoiled us. Like he's played till he's 45, but when you think about Matt Ryan, he's in his late 30s. Like that's pretty much the expiration date. We just saw Big Ben retire, and probably should have retired, a year or two beforehand, as we saw. I mean, we'll talk about him later, but Rodgers and Packers, who knows what's going on there? And then we saw Peyton Manning even towards the end there. He was trying to compete with Brady, but it was looking real bad that last year too. So yeah, I think although the rules favor the quarterbacks, and that's why they have these long careers, at the end of the day, like they always say, typical cliche, father time always wins. And I think that's just what happened with Matt Ryan. His father time has finally caught up to him. Not that he was, an athletic specimen, but, like I said, he's just what little athleticism he did had, he was able to manipulate the pocket, shuffle around, and he always had a solid enough arm. It wasn't like, Mahomes at the top. It was like, I would say by average arm, but he always had at least good anticipation, things like that. But now that his arm isn't nearly as strong enough, can't push the ball downfield, and teams are just kind of like with Drew Brees at the end too, which I forgot also Drew Brees. Teams are just kind of daring them to throw the ball downfield and just loading up between 15, 20 yards in. That's really it. And like in regards to Sam Ehlinger, I don't know much about him. I rely on my guy Sims, and he mentioned that, hey, at least Ehlinger's athletic, so maybe they're gonna, at least this will open up the run game, like you mentioned. Maybe they start leaning more on that. Just use him.
He's mobile. Matt Ryan is
not mobile.
He can't move.
So
can't move.
Like I said, maybe this opens up the offense a little bit more, and then I think Ehlinger probably has a strong arm at this point. He's, like I said, only second year in the league and is probably in the prime athletic prime of his life. So. So obviously accuracy and decision making will probably be the big questions, as with any young quarterback with Ehlinger. I don't expect the kid to come in and light up the world, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's kind of like the Mariota-ish offense, but hopefully not to that degree. I imagine they'll throw more than 13 times if they're down, but just some creative ways to throw the ball, but mostly leaning on the run game, and like I said, including Ehlinger with that. So. The move makes sense-ish to me. I mean, you got to see what you got in the kid, see if he can maybe provide a spark for your offense. But what about you?
Yeah, I don't necessarily... I don't really want to talk as much about, like, Matt Ryan being benched for my part, as much as I want to talk about, like, what has kind of led to it. Just some quick stats on Matt Ryan, and I want to bring these up because I think they sort of illustrate the point that I want to make. So obviously he has led the NFL in interceptions so far. So like that's been tough, and I think that's probably why they're looking to make a move here. But at the same time, he's second in the entire NFL when passing for first downs. He's third in completions, fourth in passing yards, fifth in completion percentage, 10th in passing touchdowns. So all great numbers, but the key reason he has all those numbers is he is second in the entire NFL in attempts, passing attempts. And that to me is what kind of upsets me about the Colts here. I feel like Matt Ryan kind of got the short end of the stick here. And Frank Reich actually said this in his post-game press conference. He said something along the lines, I don't want to give you the exact quote because I can't remember, so don't take this to that quote, but something along the lines of, this isn't Matt's fault. He doesn't deserve this, something like that. And that really stuck with me because when we both saw that Matt Ryan was going to this team, what do we expect him to be? We expected them to be a run-heavy team that plays good defense, and all Matt Ryan has to do is essentially be a game manager, not throw the ball the second most in the entire NFL and essentially have to get 400 yards for the team to win a game. Like in this game against the Titans, I mean, he had 250 yards and he had 2 interceptions. So like he didn't really do his part. But once again, as I talked about earlier, they only ran the ball with Jonathan Taylor 10 times. basically what I'm saying is I think that there needs to be some accountability for Frank Reich. I think there needs to be some accountability for Chris Ballard. I'm not necessarily saying they need to be fired, but if I'm Jim Irsay, I'm not like the fact that now we've gone from blaming Carson Wentz. First, they were blaming Jacoby Brissett, then they were blaming Carson Wentz, and now they're blaming Matt Ryan. Honestly, I know that a lot of people, myself included, have felt like this team was a QB away. They're not a QB away. They're not. They have a lot of issues. And I think the first people that we need to look towards are the GM and the coach, because I like Frank Reich, but 10 carries for Jonathan Taylor in this game is just simply not acceptable. And this was not a game that ever got out of hand. This wasn't like the Falcons Bengals where they were down 3 scores. They only lost by 9. Their defense only allowed 19 points here. And I think one of those drives for the Titans too was late. Like they scored 6 points in the fourth quarter. So they were down 13-10 like in this game late. So I just think that Frank Reich needs to be held accountable for some of that kind of stuff because he's the one calling plays. And then on the same side, I think that Chris Ballard needs to be held accountable because this is the highest paid offensive line in the league and they're not performing as they should. I mean, they have receiving talent, but they haven't really been able to utilize all of it with Michael Pittman, with Alec Pierce, now with Paris Campbell. We've seen flashes from all of them, so we know they're talented, but we've never really seen any of them get to fully develop into what we think they can be. And I know for Alec Pierce, it's his rookie year, so I'm not fully talking about him. But like Michael Pittman has had moments where it looks like he could be the best receiver in the league. And I would say that most people don't really rate him even close to that. And I would say that's probably a symptom of the offense and everything that's going on around him. So I don't know. I think that they're blaming the quarterback once again. And I really don't think that Matt Ryan is actually the issue. I think he is a symptom of the issue. It's sort of like the Russell Westbrook thing with the Lakers. Like, we knew exactly what Russell Westbrook was, and you still traded all your assets for a team that he didn't fit with, and it's not working, and you want to blame him. Blame the people who made the decision-making there. For the Colts, we knew how old Matt Ryan was. We knew he wasn't amazing the last time we saw him in Atlanta, and we thought that maybe with increased talent around him, it could work. Well, guess what? That increased talent around him either isn't being utilized like Jonathan Taylor, isn't healthy like Jonathan Taylor, or isn't playing up to the standard. So I think that Matt Ryan has kind of been given the short end of the stick here and is being unfairly blamed for all the issues when these issues go far deeper than just Matt Ryan, far deeper than Carson Wentz, and start up top. That is my rant about the Colts.
I will say, though, I think some blame does go on Irsay because I remember seeing there were reports that Irsay was the one that kind of pushed for Wentz to be moved and for them to make changes. So, but
I'm pretty sure
it's still on Ballard for them for not to be like, hey, wait a minute, like, let's just be patient,
right?
Like, so yeah, I'm
pretty sure that I don't think Reich wanted to move him because Reich had him in Philadelphia, and if you watch Hard Knocks, seems like they got along really well. So I think that was an Irsay move. And I also think that benching Matt Ryan is an Irsay move, honestly. Like, I really don't think that Frank Reich and Chris Ballard, like, just if you're a GM and you trade for a quarterback, you don't want him to be benched in the middle of the season because that instantly makes it look like you did bad. And if you're the head coach of that quarterback, a veteran quarterback, going to Sam Ehlinger, I don't think he's going to like save their season and take them to the playoffs. So, like, as bad as Matt Ryan has been, maybe he'll be better. I don't know. But like, I can't imagine that he's going to sit here and dominate. Also, I'm going to be so frustrated if when Sam Ehlinger comes in, all of a sudden Jonathan Taylor starts getting 30 carries a game and they change the game plan to do it exactly what they should have done with Matt Ryan. Anyway.
Oh, listen, I would love that. I still have Jonathan Taylor in one of my leagues. So
I mean, for like fantasy purposes, it'd be great, but I would be frustrated for Matt Ryan.
Yes, yeah. I understand. Yeah. So anyways, that is that. We'll see what happens with the Colts and Sam Ehlinger going forward. And Tennessee keeps doing Tennessee things. They're going to run the ball with Derrick Henry and play good defense. And I mean, and then somehow sneak into the playoffs as they always do. But anyways, talk about sneaking into the playoffs. Next matchup is between a couple of teams that are trying to, although now it seems like they're trending in opposite directions. That is the Washington football team. They beat my Green Bay Packers 23-21. I'll throw it to you first, John. What were your thoughts in regards to this one?
I don't really have much to say. It's your team, so I'm going to kind of defer to you here. But I will say, Taylor Heineke, if there's one thing he's at least good at, it's he's going to utilize his playmakers. Terry McLaurin had a great game. Curtis Samuel had a pretty decent game. So that was nice to see, I guess, if you're a Washington fan, because especially if you own those guys in fantasy, they have not been the most consistent throughout the year so far. And we saw in that game, Taylor Heineke had some questionable passes that were to them, and then he just let his playmakers make plays. And then for the Packers, I'll defer to you because they're your team.
All right. Well, let me start with I think as should be obvious to anyone that's watching. The main issue is it's the offense. First off, in a game that, especially for the most part, had control of, especially early on, had the pick six, which once again, not the offense, that's the defense scoring for you. So really the offense only scored 14 points, and 7 of those were at the end of the game. Rodgers threw for 35 times, and we only ran the ball 12 times. And it's not like we were getting absolutely stymied. It was only about 3 yards a run, but that's our identity going into the season. And once again, I said, I feel like you ask every Packer fan or any football person that knows, going into the season, especially the first 2 weeks, Packers are a run-first team, going to play through the defense. And especially with all the issues with the passing game going into this game, I'm just still shocked at the fact that we threw the ball 35 times and only ran the ball 12, especially with those 2 running backs. One of them we invested a second-round pick in, another one we invested a good amount of money in, and probably because we spent that money there, couldn't spend on Devontae Adams. Just saying. So that I just want to point that out I'm not sure if this next issue is purely a Rodgers issue or LaFleur issues, but like I mentioned last week, teams are catching on to the fact that we're just throwing short. And yes, if we do go deep, it's just Rodgers attacking a one-on-one, and it's a go route. It's not even like a concept where Rodgers is reading it and the guy's an in cut. There's nothing of that sort. I'm not sure if that's play design, if it's just, maybe Rodgers and LaFleur don't feel like the receivers are, executing the routes properly, or if it's Rodgers. And this is why I think it may be a little on Rodgers, if Rodgers just not going through his reads, because there are times where protection's fine, ball snap protection's fine, and he probably looking like he's looking at his first read, but then he instantly just goes down to his check down, which is, usually Aaron Jones, and he's not even going to the second, third read, yeah, so I think a little bit obviously on Rodgers, but I'm not sure if it's all on him. It could be the offensive design. That's something where the X's and O's or the organizational people can figure that out. But that is a huge thing, because I know we're missing Devontae Adams, so our passing was supposed to be lesser than. And I know there's talks that we're going to bring in a wide receiver, which we talked about a little briefly before this. I as a Packer fan, I don't believe it, because we lowballed Odell last year. Like, we kind of just put an offer, it seems like. Same with Stephon Gilmore, by the way, because remember, he was available. That would have been lovely to have him. But just say, oh, well, we tried, but, they didn't want to come. Well, yeah, because you gave him a low ball deal. I just don't foresee the organization trading for a wide receiver, especially a high price for one. Like, even though I don't expect like a Claypool, which once again, I would love Claypool. He went in the second round, so I would expect his price tag to be like second or lower. But our Packers organization has been known to be stingy with draft picks. We're always building for the future, even though we're in a win now kind of window with Aaron Rodgers. Once again, i.e. drafted Jordan Love a couple of years ago. I'm being sarcastic here, but he's just really been contributing on the field. So, that doesn't help, with them. So I'm not sure if Rodgers doesn't want to throw downfield, or he's, I do see some people, and I'm not going to argue against this. Maybe he's protecting his stats, Rodgers. Rodgers does have a good idea of things. If you look at his stats, 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, protecting that interception, the touchdown ratio towards the end. Like I said, I don't know. And I don't want to blame the defense. Defense, they got a pick six. For the most part, they kind of did their job. It's like we always say, if your offense, I don't care what defense you have, if your offense isn't keeping drives alive, keeping your defense off the field, generating points or anything, it doesn't matter what defense you have. They're eventually going to start wearing down. And like you mentioned, for Washington, I will give them credit. Heineke looked really shaky early, but because the Packers couldn't, build a lead off the pick six and such, Washington, kind of like some of these other teams we're going to mention, kind of hung around, made some plays with, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson had a solid game, And yeah, Terry McLaurin had a few great catches too. So I as a Packer fan, I'm officially hitting the panic button in regards to I'm not confident. I'm not sure if we can even make the playoffs too. But if we do, I'm just not confident we're a Super Bowl team at all. And I don't think we deserve to be in that Super Bowl contending conversation. But we probably will because of, Aaron Rodgers, even though Aaron Rodgers isn't playing. And that's another, last point, weird thing. Back-to-back MVP years where, I saw, it's just, I don't know what happened this past offseason. Maybe it's the ayahuasca. I don't know. But there are issues with the offense. And I personally don't know how to fix them. And I'm not sure if even bringing in a talented wide receiver will. I think there may be some deeper rooted issues, but yeah, good for Washington and my Packers. We got the Bills next week, so this was a very good. This was our chance to get right, and Aaron Rodgers, first time he's a double digit underdog, by the way, going next week, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's tough. I did want to bring up after I think it was today on the Pat McAfee show, because Aaron Rodgers does his Tuesday things. He was asked about this game, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. He said that if there's players who are making mental errors, they do not deserve snaps and they need to be limited. And he said that maybe there's some guys on the team who have not gotten opportunities yet who deserve to, because the guys who are starting are making errors. He didn't name anybody by name, but I have to imagine he's talking about maybe some of the young guys like Romeo Doubs, Amari Rodgers, some of those guys. So I want to hear your thoughts on that comment specifically, because me hearing that, I'm hearing Aaron Rodgers wants to win now, and that means that he needs some veterans in there who are not going to make those errors, because with rookies, that's just a thing. Not only rookies, but like just young players in general. You've got to learn and teach them and grow with them and hope that they can get better at those things. But Aaron Rodgers right now, and I think he's right, has no patience for that kind of stuff. So what are your thoughts on that quote?
I mean, it's hard to blame if he is blaming some of the inexperience at wide receiver or in the receiving room. Once again, like, what errors did they make, Aaron? If once again the ball's being snapped and you're just checking it down to Aaron Jones before they even have a chance to finish their route, I don't know. I love Aaron.
He said that there was probably 20% of their plays, there are errors that are being made. And I don't know what that means. I don't know, are they running the wrong route? Are they?
But if so too, that's one of those where he needs to go. Him and LaFleur probably be like, let's just run the ball a little bit. And once again, as I was saying, they didn't run the ball. So, an easy way to fix that is maybe. He said last week about simplifying the offense. I'm not sure what's going on with Aaron, and I really don't agree with that. Granted, too, a little bit of that fault. He is a little bit right. There's obviously a lot of inexperience, and like I mentioned, there's not a lot of comfort in the receiving room, and that does go on the organization. But also too, and I don't want to be this guy because I wasn't this guy at the time, but you can't sit here and start listing errors and such, Aaron, when you weren't there for OTAs, and you knew that you were going to not have any wide receivers. I know your free time. They are optional, but if you really wanted to win, I would assume you can take 1 week out of the summer to go back to Green Bay and work with those guys. I think he missed part of training camp too, if I remember. I'm not sure, but I know he missed OTAs. Just things like that. You saw Brady as soon as Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. Sorry, last point. First thing he was doing, and especially in the middle of COVID, he was calling up his receivers, trying to find high schools and just places where they could practice. And maybe they don't talk about that. Maybe that's just more because it's Tom Brady. It's more news. But I didn't see that at all or hear that at all with Aaron Rodgers with these guys. So a little bit of that is on you, Aaron. As much as I love you, a little bit of that's on you.
Yeah, we'll say he did choose to stay. So I feel like he knew what the thing was, because he said he knew Devontae was going to leave when he resigned, and I can't imagine that he's naive enough at this point to not understand the lack of aggressiveness his front office has shown in terms of getting established wide receiver talent in that room. So if he didn't realize that, then that's even more on him. So this was his choice.
Anyways, so yeah, we'll see if we can solve our issues against the Bills, although I probably won't. Anyways, now we go to your game, John. Your Cowboys, they win 24-20. 21-6 against the Detroit Lions. Dak is back. There weren't any chance, boos or chance for Cooper Rush. So that's good. But anyways, John, what were your thoughts on your Cowboys?
Well, they didn't light up the scoreboard or anything. It could have been worse. They had, I think it was Noah Brown. He fumbled within the 5-yard line. He had a couple drops as well. So the score could have been a lot worse than it was. But for the most part, I liked what they did in this game. Dak threw the ball 25 times. It's kind of what I want. He started off a little slow. And I know that all of a sudden everybody, Cooper, because he started off a little slow. Not slow in terms of like it was a weird slow. Like the slow is in like he was kind of being overly aggressive, like just throwing some passes deep down the field that didn't need to be thrown. So I think just like mentally he wasn't like fully back into the game speed of the NFL. But second half he came down, he cooled off. They relied on the run game. So I liked the way they played because they played the way they needed to win this game and also not like come out and exert Dak to the point that, any like crazy stuff could happen in his first game back. So I liked it. Tony Pollard had a good game. Zeke had 2 touchdowns. He had a good game. They're still doing their thing. I love the, thunder and lightning combo they got going there because it's finally like fully coming to fruition because we're seeing Tony Pollard and Zeke kind of like fully split the carries, which is great to see. So yeah, I don't have too many complaints in this game. But I do want to shout out Sam Williams on the defensive end, the rookie 2nd-round draft pick. He had 3 tackles, 2 sacks, and he did all of that in like 12 snaps. Let me pull up his exact line. He had Sam Williams, 3 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble in this game. And like I said, he did all of that in only 12 total snaps on the game. So he had a pretty monster impact. It was also against one of the best offensive lines in the league. This offensive line had only allowed their quarterback, why am I blanking on his name all of a sudden? Jared Goff. They only allowed Jared Goff to be sacked 7 times throughout the previous 6 games. What, they already have their bye week? 5 games. Only allowed him to be sacked 7 times for the previous 5 games. They sacked him, I think, 4 times on this game, and Sam Williams got 2 of those. So 5 times on this game, even better. So yeah, Cowboys defense, they came to play. Technically, I will say too, it should have been 6 because Micah Parsons tripped Jared Goff on a play. He like swiped at his foot, and they didn't give the sack to Micah. Even though if you watch the replay in slow motion, you can see Micah grab his foot. So Micah deserved another sack. I will say that. But anyway, yeah, Cowboys came to play. They did what they needed to do. Not shocked about anything that really happened in this game. But I am a little upset for the Lions because Amon-Ra St. Brown, if you had him in fantasy, you're upset too. He got ruled out very early due to concussion. It comes out he actually did not have a concussion. They pulled him because of the new rules since the Tua stuff. So that's kind of annoying for him that he didn't even have a concussion and he didn't get to play the game.
Yeah, I had him in one league, so I'm trying to pull up what exactly they said. He said he was exhibiting, and I could probably am pronouncing this wrong, ataxia, ATAXIA. It's basically, when you have poor motor control, lead to clumsy movements. It's part of the new protocol, like you mentioned. So yeah, as an owner,
I will say I'm not familiar with whatever that is. So if that's actually something that puts the player at risk, then I take it back. They did a good job. If it doesn't, then I stand by my statement.
Regardless, what probably wouldn't have helped in the grand scheme of things, like you mentioned, Goff got. I just want to say this. Welcome back, Jared Goff. Like the good and the bad. Now we're seeing, we're trying to remember to see. Oh yeah, this is why they got rid of Jared Goff. To all the people
5
that
turnovers.
That's all the people that are like, oh, well, they should have kept Jared Goff instead of trading for Matthew Stafford. Yeah, that's working out. Anyways, because I bet you those are the people too that look at the bottom line and say, well, he went 21 for 26 and 200. Yeah, okay, great, but they had 6 points. Like that amounted to nothing. Like congratulations, you threw a couple, basically 5-6 yards at a time. Anyways, I want to compliment Dallas, especially the offensive coaching staff, too, like he already alluded to, for continuing just to play complimentary football, even though they had Dak back. I was really worried that they were going to be like, all right, We got Dak back. Let's start throwing the ball 5 wide. Everybody, let's do kind of what you said, or not really 5 wide, but you know what I mean. Just be way too pass happy and forget that what's kind of gotten you here is riding your defense, and then your offense can do enough. And especially since, like you mentioned, Dak was obviously rusty a little bit at first. Like I was just really worried they were going to just throw him right back into the frying pan and expect him to or throw him right back into the deep end, and expect him to to swim immediately. So good win for Dallas. Expected win for the Lions, 1-5. Yeah, they're probably already looking at the QB position because, like we mentioned, they have some solid other pieces, but for what looked like Jared Goff might be auditioning for his job, his audition's not going well for next year. So who knows? Maybe he'll somehow end up in Indianapolis. Maybe they'll take a chance on him. Anyways, now we go to an AFC North matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. Baltimore won this one 23-20. Was a little close for comfort for them, but nonetheless they pulled it out. What were your thoughts in regards to this divisional matchup, John?
Good win for the Ravens. I did think it was interesting. Gus Edwards, first game back, Gus Bus on full display. He got 16 carries in this game, and J.K. Dobbins in his entire career has never had 16 carries in a single game. Kind of surprising. Maybe that's just, J.K. Dobbins has dealt with quite a few injuries throughout his career, so he's going to have like the greatest of sample sizes, but Gus has too, and literally first game back from an injury, 16 carries. So good win for the Ravens here. But that being said, I am a little concerned about their offense. Lamar the last 3 weeks has not been the greatest, and this offense runs through Lamar Jackson. Like if Lamar's not doing great, they don't really have the ability to rely on anybody else. Now like I said, Gus, Justice Hill, like those guys stepped up in this one, but it was against, I think, like the 4th worst run defense in the entire NFL so far in the year. So I don't know. I'm getting a little bit concerned about some of their viability moving forward, but overall it's still Lamar Jackson. I think he'll figure it out at some point, and also doesn't help that Mark Andrews was dealing with an injury. He didn't practice like all of last week. They're playing this Thursday, still hasn't practiced this week, so I don't know how healthy he actually was. He only got 1 catch for 4 yards in the game, and I'm wondering if maybe he wasn't really actually out there because he was healthy, and more so it'd be like a decoy to try to help them win. So, so I'm not like overly panicking or anything, but just something to look out for is actually he didn't even have a catch. It was 1 carry for 4 yards. He ran the ball once. Maybe it was like a little shovel pass. I didn't watch the game. Anyway, good win for the Ravens. For the Browns, I do find it interesting that Kareem Hunt is getting less and less carries. He got 5 this week. Now, he did score a touchdown, but only 5 carries and 1 reception. And I'm starting to wonder if they're potentially going to trade him. I know that he had requested a trade earlier in the offseason. So
I heard that on the Happy Hour with Matthew Berry's new podcast. I heard that they mentioned that too, that he's probably going to be shopped. So
yeah, probably. And I thought that maybe the Jets would make sense, but because of the way his contract works out and Breece Hall and all that kind of stuff. But obviously they traded for James Robinson, so we'll see. I don't know. I think there's quite a few teams that could use a guy like Kareem Hunt, and it'd be interesting to see him be a feature back once again, because we haven't seen him be that since he left Kansas City. So yeah, good win for the Ravens. Otherwise, don't have a ton to say.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. I mean, although the passing game has been, like you mentioned, has been a concern. Also, Rashad Bateman's been dealing with an injury. Like he didn't practice today too, and he just got back on the field last week. So maybe was 100% re-aggravated or something. But I will say the run game's shaping into form, so they can get that going. That could probably help get their pass game going down the line, and hopefully they can get back Dobbins to add with Edwards, because Edwards is more just the in between the tackles type guy. He's not going to break a bunch of home runs on you. I will say, we'll give credit to the Ravens front 7, especially the front 4, the run defense. They did a great job early on just to stop the run. We all know Cleveland, that's what they want to do. They want to establish the run first, but they didn't let them do that. Cleveland kind of had to beat them through the air, and as we saw, it was close, but not enough. But and especially since Cleveland did lose Njoku this game as well. He looks like he's gonna be out for a while, so that's just less weapons for the Browns. I will say Brissett was solid, but obviously not. He's Jacoby Brissett. We kind of know what he is. He's not going to carry you to victories here. But yeah, otherwise, I don't have much else to add. I mean, we'll see what happens with Baltimore as they limp into this Thursday night game. And but obviously, a huge win for them because they're 4-3. We mentioned the Bengals won earlier, and the Bengals seem to be right catching fire at the right time. Yeah, I'd be interested to see if their pass game does what direction it'll go in because like you mentioned, I think it was it last year too. Remember they also started off really hot. Lamar was beating the Titans and the Chiefs late in games and such and doing things in the air. But then he got hurt, so it was a little bit different. But the passing game fell off from there. So we'll see if Baltimore can keep it up and keep their hold on the AFC North. But now we go to the upset of the week. That's why I'm proclaiming it. The Panthers, they beat the Bucs 21-3. We obviously didn't see it coming. None of us picked the Bucs. Oh, I was surprised. For lock, obviously. But yeah, Panthers win somehow, some way. I'm just gonna throw it to you, John. What were your thoughts?
Kind of shocked. I mean, everyone's focusing on that Mike Evans drop. Maybe that changes a little bit of the game, but I still think the Panthers would have won. And like you were talking about the Packers, and it's probably time to start panicking. I think it's time to panic on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, I will say for their division, it's going to be a lot easier for them to maybe make the playoffs because they're not having to deal with a team like the Vikings, who are looking pretty good in terms of record so far. Like they're having to deal with the Falcons, who we already ranted about all their issues. So it's going to be a lot easier for them to make the playoffs. But that being said, you lose to the Panthers. Anything's possible. Like they could lose to a lot of the division opponents if this kind of game is any indicator of what's going to happen moving forward. Yeah, I don't really know what's going on in Tampa. I don't really want to speculate on all the personal stuff that people are talking about with Tom Brady, but that is potential concern of just distractions that are going on. I know even like last week it was Robert Kraft's wedding, and Tom did not fly with the team to Pittsburgh. He went to Kraft's wedding and then went to the game separately like the next day, Saturday. And you got to imagine he was staying out late, hanging out with the guys there and Robert. So I don't know. I just think there's some off the field distractions going on for the Buccaneers, and that combined with maybe some of the injuries on the offensive line, the run defense actually, I don't have statistics to back this up, so don't quote me on this, but like just the eye test have not really impressed me, honestly. Like I think back to when the Cowboys played them. I know they beat the Cowboys, but Zeke was averaging over 5 yards a carry, which is really good against Tampa. In this game, Donta Foreman averaged 8 yards a carry at 118 on the ground. Chuba Hubbard averaged 7 yards a carry. Like teams are having run success against them. And so I just think that this Tampa team, they're getting old. They got a lot of veterans, and yeah, might be time to panic a little bit about the Buccaneers because they have not looked as good as they have in previous years. But shout out to the Panthers because they looked really good.
Yeah, that's one of my points too, is just something I've noticed over the weeks, and probably should have realized this through roster assessment, is the front four just isn't as good. I mean, they're definitely not as deep either. Remember, previous years they had obviously Vita Vea, but then they had Sue and JPP, and Vern Golson was, like you mentioned, age. He's been hit with age, but he was doing pretty solid too as a filling guy. And then obviously on top of that was Shaquille Barrett, and then 2 linebackers. But then no Sue in the Sue leaves in the off season. Vern Golson gets older. Same with JPP, he leaves as well. They let him go. So. Yeah, I mean, losing, even though those other guys are still pretty good, losing that depth, the reliable depth, and just different ways to attack, other offensive lines, especially. I mean, they would give every offensive line fits. They were like you mentioned, one of the, I think they were, if not the best one, the top 2 or 3 run defenses for like 2 straight years. You couldn't run the ball on them. And it's funny because it's kind of like reverse, because during that time, their secondary was still relatively young with, Carlton Davis and Antoine Winfield Jr., and they were still kind of, that was like the quote-unquote Achilles heel of the defense. But now it's kind of flipped in reverse. Like, secondary solid, but that front four has got some holes. So we'll see if they can get that resolved. I have faith in Todd Bowles. Maybe he needs to be a little bit less aggressive. That might help because he does tend to do that. And offensively, I think there's a little bit more hope for the Bucs. They have more weapons, and they should be hopefully get Ryan Jensen back at some point. In a month or so from now. So that may jumpstart their O-line, especially at the center position. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that drop was cost them the game. It would have helped momentum early on, but other than that, even if you count that, I mean, there really wasn't much success offensively. I do want to give credit to the Panthers front four. I kind of undervalue them because they were a big part in this win. Obviously, the Bucs weren't able to get the run game going, and then the Bucs fell behind, so they keep passing. And although the Panthers only got one sack, just getting that early pressure on Brady. We mentioned age; he's 45 years old. I mean, I'm pretty sure even the guys in their 30s, no one wants to keep getting hit. And so I think you can tell a lot of times that his clock was going quickly, getting the ball out quicker maybe than he wanted to, and then the play asked for. So, yeah, credit the Panthers front four for really making life tough for Tom. And I do want to shout out to welcome back DJ Moore. Back from they finally figured out, oh man, we should probably let's figure out ways to get DJ Moore the ball. And he finally, got the ball. The quarterback actually got the ball to him, and they actually had some good design plays. So good for DJ Moore. Good to see that, he's relevant. Darn, it sucks too because in one fantasy league I picked him up last week, and right before the games, I think I dropped him for Foreman. But who knows? That drop may work out for me. But the Panthers keeping hope alive per se, not really, but yeah, putting the Bucs at least in a tough spot in the division. As I don't know how the division standings work, but I forget. Is Atlanta technically? I think both them and Atlanta are 3-4. Let me see if I can find it. I'm sorry.
I think Tampa holds a tiebreaker because I believe they beat the Falcons.
Oh yes, they do. You are correct. Tampa is technically first place in their division at 3-4. So the Falcons, and then the Carolina Panthers and Saints are only one game behind at 2-5. Yeah. So the ever so fun NFC South. We'll see what happens there, but. Big win for the Panthers and Steve Wilkes. Good for him. I always felt that he didn't get a fair shake in Arizona. He got stuck with Josh Rosen, only got like 1 year, and got thrown to the curb for Cliff Kingsbury. So we'll see who has the last laugh there. But speaking of teams that are surprising, the New York Giants, John, they're trucking along. The New York team as they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 23-17. What were your thoughts on your division rivals getting the win here?
I thought this might be the week that they go down and they finally lose. And then in the fourth quarter, the Jags collapse. The Giants score 10 points. They make a comeback, and they get the win. So good win for the Giants. I don't really know what to keep saying at this point about them outside of they're a scrappy team and they find ways to win. For the Jaguars, it's Travis Etienne's season, baby. He's officially taken over that backfield, 114 yards on 14 carries, 8.1 yards per touch, and a touchdown. And obviously got a reception as well. So that's nice. But otherwise, I don't know. I feel a little sad for the Jags because they are 2-5, which record-wise would indicate they're one of the worst teams in the league. But they're like top 11 in both offensive and defensive EPA. And just based on that stat, like all those other teams that are up there are like very good teams. And so I don't know. I think they have a lot of games that could have gone either way. And this felt like one of them. This felt like they missed their opportunities late in this one. And so sucks for the Jags. But for the Giants, once again, they just keep finding ways to win. I don't know how, but they're doing it.
Yeah. Where do I want to start? Let me start with the Giants, and I'm going to the Jags. I have an issue with the Jags. You can mention Giants offense. I think the main key is just, like I said, there's controlling time possession. I went back and looked. So in 5 of the 7 games they've played, they've won time possession, and there's only 2 times they didn't win time possession, and that was one to Dallas, and that's when they lost. Their only loss on the record. And the other one was Tennessee week 1, but that was actually a week where they had some big plays on offense. But for the most part, I mean, their offense, right, we've kind of harped on this a lot, and I'll say it one more time. It's just, hey, Daniel Jones, either got some short passes or, take the ball and run, and then we have some creative runs and plays for Saquon. That's kind of it, but they're playing to their strengths, and good for them. They're figuring out different ways to move the ball there. And then their defense, we already mentioned, takes some chances, kind of forces the issue at times, but doesn't really get beat a lot. So that's good. And with Wheat Martindale, he's very blitz happy, so that can happen. For the Jags, great to see ETN unleashed. I'm with you on that. I think we're kind of seeing, though, they're lacking a number one receiver. They're lacking a reliable go-to kind of threat, I think, for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I know they signed Christian Kirk, but I think Christian Kirk's a really good number two. Like, there's a reason why we all kind of side-eyed that contract and scoffed at it. But so hopefully maybe that's something they address via the draft, or maybe they might be in the ones low key in the market for a DJ Moore, if or one of these other receivers that may be available. Just it would kind of fit, because I mean Trevor Lawrence isn't doing terrible. I mean, he is missing a couple throws, especially key ones, but I mean, once again, like you alluded to with that they're up there in those efficiency numbers. I think it's just a young team too. Yeah, they're messing up or not fully executing in critical situations. One thing though I do want to note, and that's not on the players, it's more on the coaching staff. Doug Peterson, take the points. End of the third quarter ish. They're up. I'm trying to remember. They're up, I think 17-13. And they're in the Giants, like outside of the red zone. I think they're like a 30-ish. So it's in field goal range. 3rd and 1, they direct snap at ETN. They don't get it. And the Giants have a pretty good interior. They have Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence. They got solid guys on the inside. And they got stuff on 3rd down. No gain at all. So then they say, okay, even though we direct snapped it to ETN, let's just QB sneak it with Lawrence. And they don't get it. And they're up, by the way, 17-13. Like, take the points, Doug Peterson. I'm just saying. I know it's 4th and 1, and probably, but like, take the points till you go up 7, so that if they score a touchdown, which by the way the Giants did, it's at least a tie game. And then guess what? It still affected the bottom line at the end, because maybe if you do take your field goal there when they were driving, because they lost 23-20, and they were knocking on the touchdown door, but they could have just taken the field goal and gone to OT. But anyways, regardless, take the points, Doug Peterson, instead of trying to, they lost 23-17. So yeah, I mean, at the end there, if it was 23-20, as we all know, no simple math, you take the 3, you go to overtime, maybe it's a different game. So take the points, Doug Peterson. And he's not the only one. There'll be someone else I got to mention later. I love the going for on 4th down, but still have some tact about it and kind of know your opponent. So so there we go from that game to the other New York game, where the Jets, they win 16-9 over the Denver Broncos. Very much so a defensive battle. What were your thoughts here, John?
Well, Broncos, you got Brett Ripien out there, and I saw some people saying, well, this is a clear indicator that Russell Wilson is not the problem. And while I've been stating that this entire time, I don't think this game really changed anything, because like Brett Ripien, nobody expects him to be good. Like, the guy has one career game, and it was against the Jets like a couple of years ago. And I can't remember if he won that game. They might have, but I think they did. But it doesn't matter, because he's, I don't think anybody really considers him to be that great of a quarterback, even in terms of being a backup. So he had a rough game, even that last play. I will say he did throw a touchdown to Cortland Sutton, and Sauce Gardner got beat on the play, and Sauce was holding. They did not call it, so it is what it is. Sucks because it lost me my fantasy game, but Sauce got away with one there. So I won't say that Brett Ripien had like the worst of games, because he is a backup, and like it's tough, especially since the run game never really got going. And they tried to run. Like, they didn't give up on it. Melvin Gordon, 11 carries. Latavius Murray had 8. Mike Boone had 4, and then he got hurt. So you got Montrell Washington coming in and running. Like, they tried, and it just didn't really get going for anybody. So they had to pass a lot. They were behind a lot of the game as well. So I don't totally blame them. Actually, they weren't behind a lot of the game. They were pretty close until the 4th quarter. But still, the run game just wasn't really getting anywhere.
Still a 1-score game.
Yeah. So, but regardless, I don't totally blame Brett Ripien or anybody that really went into this game. And for the Jets, it looked like it was going to be easy sledding when Breece Hall came out and just instantly hit that home run. And then unfortunately, he tears his ACL. Broke my heart. Broke my fantasy teams. It's going to be hard to recover. And it's really unfortunate for him because he looked like he was running his way to an Offensive Rookie of the Year award. And now, unfortunately, his season is over. So prayers up for Breece Hall that he can bounce back even better next year. But I will say they traded for James Robinson, but I'm a little bit concerned about what this offense is going to be now because Breece Hall kind of gave them an identity of like, we're going to run the ball down your throat with Breece Hall. And without him, I don't think that like James Robinson and Michael Carter are going to be able to replicate that same success. I like both of them, but neither of them are as good as Breece Hall. And I just don't know what the identity of this team is going to be because ever since, like, and I've mentioned this before, when they didn't have Zach Wilson, they threw the ball a ton. And now that he's here, they ran the ball a ton and it was working. And so maybe this means Zach Wilson's going to throw the ball more. I don't know. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Like, he's shown flashes, but I don't feel like they've really given him much opportunity to do that much. Like, they're kind of just like, they were relying on the run game, and that's totally fine. And so maybe this is an opportunity for Zach to really step up and start to show the league what he can do. Because I wouldn't say he's been bad. Like, I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, Zach Wilson's been terrible. Like, he's been fine. Like I said, I just don't think they've really given him anything crazy that he has to do. He hasn't been playing from behind that much because they've been playing with leads the last couple weeks. So this could be a week or a situation moving forward where maybe we can see the Jets passing attack finally become relevant again. But otherwise, I just don't really know what the identity of this offense is going to be because once Breece Hall got hurt, the offense kind of struggled to move the ball throughout the day. And I don't think they really knew what they wanted to do in terms of like play calling and attacking the defense. And they were playing a really good defense in Denver. So it's not like it's the end of the world because they got out with a win. But yeah, I'm interested to see what the Jets do moving forward in terms of like their identity.
I just want to start there. And you mentioned Denver defense. I think too, people need to realize like it's a pretty good defense. Like that defense has been the saving grace of this team. I'll start with Zach Wilson since I'm one of the Zach Wilson defenders. I will say game script hasn't really gone as kind of for his stats at least hasn't really gone their way. I mean, remember Miami, it's a kind of a close game and his second game back. I'm not really counting the Pittsburgh game, but even that game, like you kind of already mentioned, like it was a lot of we're gonna lean on the run game and let the defense, which the defense has been a very good revelation, let the defense do their job. That's what happened in Miami. Remember that game was kind of close late in the third quarter, and I think going to the fourth, and then Miami turned the ball over. It's kind of like an explosion there. And even Green Bay, kind of the same thing where I think it was a close game at half, but then Green Bay couldn't move the ball. Defense made some plays, and the run game got going. So Zach didn't have to make a bunch of throws. And I think basically the same thing happened here. I think I just feel like they kind of came in. Okay, it's Ripien, but we know this defense is really good. And let's not give them force the ball too much. Let's not try to blow them out and then end up making some mistakes. Then all of a sudden we're down 7 or 10 to Denver and a really good defense kind of playing into their hands. For Zach Wilson too, and also for the Jets, I mean, you mentioned losing Breece Hall is, very fortunate for him, but they also lost Elijah Vera Tucker this game too. Elijah Moore didn't play because, he wants, more targets. And then it also lost Corey Davis this game pretty early on too. So really only reliable receiver is going to be Garrett Wilson. I think Denzel Mims, I know he played, I think he got hurt too, possibly. So regardless, even if they're down to their fourth wide receiver, and so I think there's a little bit of managing the game there, and we know their tight end isn't great. And on top of the fact that they've already lost, Mekhi Becton early in the season, and then if I remember correctly, Dwayne Brown was dealing with an injury, so I think they're kind of just managing their roster at that point offensively and trying not to put Zach Wilson too much in harm's way. Because as much as I love him, he's had, he's not the biggest guy, so he has been dealing with some injuries. So maybe there's kind of easing him back into this, trying to, kind of run the Packerish offense. Not their offense is much better, obviously. There's that stat. I think he only threw 10 plus yards like twice. I mean, once again, I think that's just more, let's not, make mistakes. We're just going to kind of manage this game. We know our defense is better we'll win their side of the war. And obviously Breece Hall had the early touchdown. So they're kind of just rested. And it's a defensive coach in Robert Saleh. So it makes sense that they're leaning on their defense and running the game or running the ball. So, I'll be interested to see going forward. Maybe this will help smooth things over with Elijah. More like, hey, we might not be able to run the ball, Elijah, so we might need you, buddy. We'll see what happens with him. But not too concerned about Zach Wilson in that offense yet. I mean, once again, dude hasn't had a turnover in 3 games. I know he hasn't, been lighting up the world, but hasn't been costing them games. So, but yeah, for Denver, I'm not much to say on their offense. I mean, like you said, it was Ripien. What do we expect? If anyone was expecting them to light up the world, then I'm sorry, I can't. We're expecting Ripien to light up the world, then I can't help you. No. So, anyways, good win for the Jets as they continue along. The New York teams grow stronger and stronger, or at least amounting the wins. But now we head over to Vegas, where the Las Vegas Raiders, they take care of business 38-20 over the Houston Texans, kind of as we all expected. What were your thoughts on this one, John?
Josh Jacobs, total beast. Sucked for me in fantasy because I needed Derek Carr to throw some touchdowns, but it is what it is. They got the win, and that's really what matters here. The Texans, I mean, I think they're probably the worst team in the league. I've said this a couple times, but they put up a fight, and that's really what you want. I think Davis Mills actually had a pretty decent game, despite throwing the pick. He had 300 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns. He was resilient, is what I would say in this game, despite playing against Max Crosby, Chandler Jones, some guys who are very good on the defensive line who were putting him under pressure throughout the day. And I think he did a good job, too, of getting the ball out quick and avoiding taking sacks, because that could have really gotten things out of hand. Still, it did get out of hand because I think they got a pick 6 late in the game. And, the Raiders were just the better team. This was a game they needed to win, both coming into this game with only 1 win. And the Raiders, I think, just based on the talent they have, were obviously going to be pretty desperate to come out with a victory here. So not much to say. Good win for the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders have more top-end talent, definitely. And like you mentioned, it's welcome back, Josh Jacobs, too. He's my offensive ball of the week. 143 yards, 20 carries, on 20 carries, 143 yards, 3 touchdowns. Like I mentioned when we were talking about the picks, we were making our predictions. I mean, he's looking like his rookie self. He has that same kind of burst, and not only just burst, just attitude. He's running, basically fearless. I'm not saying he wasn't before, but I think previous years he was dealing with a bunch of injuries. I think now he's fully healthy, and probably too with the fact that this passing attack is pretty good with Devontae, obviously, and Hunter Renfrow and Waller, probably opening up more lanes for him. And the fact that it is Josh McDaniels, he still has a very good mind in regards to running the ball and just offense in general. Probably one of the best minds there is. So, credit to Josh Jacobs, and credit to the Las Vegas Raiders. Get a key win there, as they're 2-4, but you're never really out of it until you're out of it, or they're still in it technically. So we'll see if they can keep their playoff hopes alive. And they're very happy that they got the win, because the Los Angeles Chargers, they did not get the win. They did not take care of business, as they lost to the Seattle Seahawks 37-23. Seahawks away. Throw it to you, John. What were your thoughts on this big West Coast upset?
Speaking of beastly running backs, Kenneth Walker, also a beast, showing the talent that he had. And I'm glad that he's getting to show it now, because my biggest concern that I had mentioned in the preseason was that the Seattle Seahawks and Pete Carroll tend to rely on the veteran, and that's what they were doing with Rashad Penny early. And it's unfortunate that Rashad Penny did get hurt, but we're seeing how dominant Kenneth Walker can be. And I really got to give a shout out to this Seattle front office, because just on the season, I know that everyone's talking about, oh, Russell, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about like the results of like, I don't care about how Russell's performance is looking. I care about the fact that they have nailed it on the draft picks this past year. You got studs at the tackle spots with Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas in the 3rd round. Both have looked like monsters and potential franchise building blocks for a very long time on the edges for them. Kenneth Walker is obviously a monster and, paying dividends. You got Tariq Woolen on the defensive side, and, he's already looking like he would potentially be defensive rookie of the year. He's competing with Sauce Gardner for that. Like, they just had a really, really good draft class. That's not even mentioning some of the other young guys like Kobe Bryant and all these other dudes who could continue to develop and be high-impact players moving forward. So, shout out to the Seahawks front office, because the reason that they're looking so good so far and are number one in the NFC West is because of a lot of these young players having big impacts. And shout out to Geno Smith too, because he's continuing to ball out. For the Chargers, I just really don't understand why they continue to make Justin Herbert throw the ball like 50 or 60 times in these games. You have Austin Eckler. He's a good running back. I know that like he's not the biggest bruiser and you don't want to run him like 30 times, but how many times have they tried to find these other young running backs behind him? They got Isaiah Spiller, they got Sony Michel, they got Joshua Kelly. Like they have all these different people. Like we saw Sony Michel have success for the Rams last year, so maybe get him more involved in the run game and try to establish some semblance of a run, because they have not been fully healthy in terms of the receiving weapons. Obviously, Keenan Allen, he did play this game, but he barely played. And now Mike Williams gets hurt, and so he's going to be out. Well, they didn't say how long, but he's going to be out. And you don't have your starting left tackle and all these kind of things. And Justin Herbert also, just candidly, I love Justin Herbert. He's not having the greatest of years, and I don't know if that's because of the stuff going around him. I don't know if that's the play calling. I don't know what. He's not doing terrible, but he's just not having the monster performances he was last year. And I think that they could do him some favors if they would just rely on the run a little bit more, because they run the ball so little against all these defenses that they're playing who are not like the greatest of run defenses. So shout out to Seattle. Great win. I would consider this an upset. Despite the fact that I think a lot of people would say that, would have predicted Seattle to win this one. But for the Chargers, you don't need to like overly panic. You're still 4-3. You still have talent. They're going into the bye week. They need to figure some stuff out and try to make life a little bit easier for Justin Herbert while other players are missing in action. And when you get reinforcements a little later down the road, hopefully with Mike Williams and Joey Bosa eventually coming back and all that, then maybe you can potentially live up to expectations. But otherwise, good win for the Seahawks. And also, they're not a rebuild. I know that Pete Carroll's already said that, but 4-3 and they got more draft picks on the way. I think it's time to remove the rebuild tag off this team. Not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything, but they're not competing for the number one pick.
Yeah, definitely so. In regards to the Chargers offense, I think there's a couple things. Main thing is and we mentioned before, they're just missing an explosive element. And now that Mike Williams, we'll see how he's feeling after the bye week. But hopefully they get Keenan Allen back. But they just don't have a deep threat at all, none. And on top of the fact that a lot of their play calling, Joe Lombardi is. I think the short passing is on Lombardi. It's just that's all they're doing is short passes. That's all they're calling. Not a lot of shot plays, maybe because they don't have an explosive element. But regardless, like. You have Justin Herbert. We all saw him the first 2 years where he was just bombs away, putting kind of like prime Rodgers almost at times, where he just, even though if it was one-on-one, he was finding a way to fit the ball or give his guy a chance. And oftentimes they're not, the wide receiver got the ball. And we just haven't seen anything like that this year. And I think that's just more play calling / play design. I mentioned the question of fourth down calls. This is another one of the week. The Chargers get opening off the Seahawks opening drive, get an interception, on the red zone. Okay, they don't get it. And what does Brandon Staley do? Goes for it on fourth down, and they did run it, but they got stopped. And that's just one. Once again, you get the opening pick. I just think you take your points there. You got a free 3 points basically, but instead you go for it. And you give Seattle some momentum because you go for it and you don't get it. And momentum's a real thing, because also guess what happened the next two Chargers possessions? Interception and fumble. And now all of a sudden, instead of maybe being down 14-3 or 10-3, you're down 17-0 because you didn't take the points, and also because you gave the momentum. So that I think was a blunder by Brandon Staley, and he's done this a lot, as we all know. Obviously, the Chargers' run defense is still a major concern, as Kenneth Walker just ran all over them. Especially, he iced the game basically with that 60-plus yard touchdown. Granted, they will get Joey Bosa back, but I think they are lacking general size in their linebackers and on the interior part. I think they just need some key guys to just plug some holes basically. And unfortunately, Jerry Tillery and I think the guy that signed Joseph Sebastian Day just that's not their MO. They're more they're on the lighter side of defensive tackles, especially if you want them to be run stuffers. So I'm not sure they can address that. Obviously, they lose J.C. Jackson also, so that's going to hurt more too. So this defense is kind of falling apart injury wise by the second. It always seems like the Chargers get the injury bug bad. But yeah, in regards to Seattle, like you mentioned, them and Geno doing a great job just managing games, especially Geno, taking the chances when they're available, but not being overly aggressive or trying to force the issue. I mean, you throw a pick on your first drive, and that's another thing too. Threw a pick, it didn't really matter. He was fully able to get it out of his mind because he didn't get any points off it, and he basically got the ball back right where he started. So, yeah, but good on Geno for his career revival here. And I will say, too, on top of the fact that it was short passing, I mean, look at the second half. I mean, Seattle was all over the Chargers for the most part. I know the Chargers had that touchdown on our last drive, but at that point, it was 37-16. So Seattle was just playing some off coverages, just playing time basically. So we'll see if the Chargers can reinvigorate their pass offense, fix that going forward. They hopefully should get Keenan Allen back after the bye week. And for Seattle, like you said, this wasn't a rebuild. It's probably more of a reload because although they did, DK Metcalf may miss some time. Marquise Goodwin had a good game and has, maybe him and Lockett can kind of fill in. Well, we know Lockett's good, but maybe, they can find other ways to fill in for DK's production. But
also, can I just say, Chargers, stop playing players like when Justin Herbert has been playing in these blowouts late in the games. Why did Keenan Allen even play today? Like, if he's going to play and he's actually good to go, then play him. Clearly, he was not because he got 2 catches for 11 yards and he didn't even play half the snaps. Like, just let the guy rest.
A week before your bye week. Like, just take the extra week.
And just stop doing it. You're getting blown out. Stop playing the starters late because Mike Williams got hurt late in the game here too.
Yes,
just accept it and move on because you're suffering the consequences of it this year. And I don't think they're 4-3 right now despite all these injuries. Imagine if they were a fully healthy team, they could be up there with the Bills and the Chiefs and all the best teams in the league.
Alrighty. So now we go to a Super Bowl from a couple of years ago, the rematch between the Chiefs and Niners. Chiefs win this one pretty handily, 44-23. Christian McCaffrey's first game as a Niner, only had limited snaps. What were your thoughts on this game, John?
Well, obviously, I mean, McCaffrey wasn't going to have the biggest impact. I know all the Stanford jokes, but he's still, he's still got to learn the playbook and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't expect him to come out and have a monster performance. That being said, good win from the Chiefs. I will be interested to see if these teams. I think that both. Obviously, I think the Chiefs are contenders, and I think the Niners have the talent to when they're fully healthy. So we'll see. I would be interested to see. I wish I could see these teams play again when they are fully healthy, and maybe that happens if they play in the Super Bowl. Because although I think the Chiefs, they came out and they did their thing, I don't think this was the fairest of fights just because of the injuries the Niners have been dealing with, McCaffrey not fully ingrained. But that being said, I still think the Chiefs are the better team. We both picked them to win. I locked them in this, or did I lock them in this game? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I did. So yeah, did. I locked them to win and cover in this game. That's what they did. And they're getting scary, man, because so far throughout the year, we haven't really seen any game in which their receivers fully dominated. But in this one, we saw it. Juju Smith-Schuster, 124 yards through the air and a touchdown. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 111 yards through the air. Even McCole Hardman, a receiver, made some big plays, 2 rushing touchdowns through these jet sweeps. Had a receiving touchdown as well. They're looking real scary, man. And they haven't even gotten guys like Sky Moore involved yet. And I can only imagine Isaiah Pacheco, he got named the starter this week, only got 8 carries. I can only imagine if these young guys start to make big impacts too, the Chiefs are looking really, really good.
Yeah, I was saying their offense is clicking. As you kind of already alluded to, Holmes is just more able to spread the ball out, especially with these different receivers. I know obviously Tyreek Hill's better than all of them, but I think we're seeing as a whole, as a receiver room as a whole, it's a lot more dangerous because yes, you can double Kelsey, but then these other guys can beat you in so many which ways. And we all know Andy Reid is very good at maximizing receiver and just really offensive skill position talent, as we've seen throughout the years, like you already alluded to with, Mecole Hardman in the run game and such. Not much to say. Like you said, Niners are missing guys on defense, though, missing Armstead and Kinlaw, two key guys on the inside, and then Bosa was just coming back off an injury, so who knows if he was actually 100% anyway. In regards to, though, the Niners, I mean, it was a close game, especially towards the end of the first half, and I will say, killer interception by Jimmy G in the red zone. Yeah, it was about 14-13 at the time. He could, even if he, play it safe. Once again, he forced the ball, and got picked. You could at least you would have at least had 3 points, obviously, in the red zone. And they said you don't. You go into the half down 14-13, and then the Chiefs do Chiefs things, and they go on a crazy run the second half. I will say, too, Christian McCaffrey, he looked good in his limited snaps, definitely better than he has in Carolina, but I think we can all agree, better talent all around him here, and just that, but and a better coaching staff, too, probably. But he did get a little more usage than I thought he would, but regardless, I was encouraged, and I'm interested to see what they'll do with him more going forward. Since we obviously made that video, and you can check that out, of our reactions to that trade. But not much to add. I mean, Chiefs kind of blew it out in the second half, so we'll see if the Niners can get healthy, and obviously the Chiefs if they can keep clicking the way they have been. But now we go to the Sunday night game. And it was the Miami Dolphins. They win 16-10 over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Wasn't pretty. All the scoring was done in the first half. So that's all you really needed to watch if you wanted to watch this game. So, John, what were your thoughts on the Sunday nighter?
Good defensive win from the Dolphins. Obviously, they forced Kenny Pickett into 3 interceptions. And I think that Kenny Pickett might be one of the most unlucky QBs in terms of interceptions thrown. Yes, he does make some bad throws, but also it feels like every game, at least one of those interceptions is hitting off of somebody's hands and then going into a defender's hands. And so he could clean some of those things up. But I do think there's some stuff that's a little bit unlucky here. My guy, George Pickens, great game, 61 yards and a touchdown. Pat Freiermuth, it was good to see him get back involved and have a good performance. So, yeah, I mean, the Steelers, they're doing what we kind of expected them to do. Meanwhile, the Dolphins, good win here. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle getting involved. Tua did enough to win once again. He did have like 4 plays that should have been picked off by the Steelers defense.
Yep.
Yeah, and they didn't capitalize on that. So I got to knock the Steelers for that one, because that could have been some game changers if they were able to turn all of those over and maybe win this game. So yeah, otherwise I don't have much analysis, because like you said, there wasn't a ton that really happened in this game. It wasn't the prettiest, it wasn't the ugliest, it was just kind of for both teams.
Yeah, I do want to say in regards to the 4 interceptions, one of my notes here was, Pittsburgh was, especially in the second half, they really made good adjustments into being all over the short passing game. And the fact, if they can just convert a couple, just come down with 1 or 2 of those, that could have been a game changer. And hey, that was a concern for Tua, for both of us going out, as Kenny pushed the ball downfield. He wasn't really able to do so this game. Granted, it was his first game back, so I will give him that little bit of a pass, and they won the game. And at the end of the day, that's probably why they're playing defense. They probably don't have great hands, and Tua still looks solid. So and then I'm not forgetting about Pickett either. It's just a really good Miami defense, and like we've mentioned before, Pittsburgh offensive line doesn't do them any favors. So the run game wasn't really great, although Najee Harris found some holes. So credit, they did get it going a little bit, but not enough, as obviously, like you mentioned, at least one unlucky interception, and it's Kenny Pickett's still learning the game, and Miami's not an easy defense with all the creative things that they do on their end to go up against. So unfortunately, Brian Flores was not going to get his revenge game win, but now we head over to the Monday night game, and that was between the Chicago Bears. They surprisingly blow out the Patriots 33-14. It was Mac Jones to start the game, but then they threw in Bailey Zappi because that whole scenario. I will say, and I'm going to start great to see Justin Fields. I know he didn't throw a whole bunch like we wanted him to, but at least he was involved in the offense via the run game. Granted, once again, Patriots gave them some short fields and with three turnovers, but Justin Fields, hey, they're using him. They're finding, like we mentioned, is a very Mariota-ish stats at the beginning of the year, and I think we can all agree. I think Justin Fields definitely has more upside at this point than Mariota, and I think he's a better thrower anyway than Mariota at this point anyway. So it was good to see him kind of unleash per se. I mean, the Bears seems like they're kind of leaning towards the run game because that's probably where their talent is. Khalil Herbert's been solid for them the past couple of years. We all know David Montgomery's solid. He's not a star, but he's solid. And then adding Justin Fields to that running attack. I mean, obviously this week worked as a New England, one of the better defenses too. They had issues with that run game, and it's not the first time they've had issues with the mobile quarterback in the option game. Lamar Jackson's been giving them issues. Even you go back to further in Bill Belichick's tenure, Cam Newton and Deshaun Watson always gave him issues because, I mean, these mobile quarterbacks, it's one of the reasons why the game's leaning towards the mobile quarterbacks, because you can have the right defense, but then, the mobile quarterback, he just runs and, makes plays on his own that you can't really defend against. I will say, too, Chicago defense, very well coached. I mean, obviously, Roquan Smith in the midst of his contract situation, he's raising his value. He's also my defensive baller of the week. He had 12 tackles, 8 solo, 1 sack, and an interception, just doing whatever, whenever, basically. And in regards to New England, in regards to their offense especially, I know Mac Jones got pulled from this game relatively early, and and Bailey Zappi got thrown in, and Bailey Zappi did have, didn't help. He had a great play like right after he came in. I think he threw that long, do a touchdown pass, and Jacoby Myers had a good drive, but after that, kind of came back for Bailey Zappi as he had 2 interceptions. They didn't pull out the win here, obviously, New England, since. But yeah. Anyways, what were your thoughts on this one, John?
Well, I was actually really impressed with Chicago, and the one thing I really want to talk about, and this is a big shout out to the coaching staff because Matt Eberflus actually mentioned this in the post-game press conference, is they're coming off their bye week, and right? I think they came off the bye.
No, they came off a Thursday night game, so they kind of had like a mini bye.
Yeah, mini bye, long week to really get to think about it. And he mentioned that during the extended break, he had a meeting with the coaches, and they just kind of talked about what they want their identity to be on this team, because they're sitting at 2-4 at that point, and the season's not necessarily out of reach. Like, you can still make something of this year, but you kind of got to show some desperation here, and you got to show some urgency and figure things out. And instantly, I think it paid dividends because Justin Fields had 14 carries, and I don't think he had like more than, I think the number was like 6 or 7 at any other game this year. So he had almost double the amount of carries that he's had in any game. And I think that instantly paid dividends because we saw Justin Fields, 14 carries, 82 yards. He got a rushing touchdown. And that just kind of opened up things for the rest of the offense. It opened up things for himself in the passing game because now the defense has to respect that. And I was just really impressed with that game plan switch because, I mean, I think it was kind of obvious that that's what you need to do, but like that's what we've seen other teams like Philadelphia did with Jalen Hurts early in his career. Okay, maybe he's not fully polished as a passer yet. He's still learning certain concepts, whatever. Okay, they didn't have AJ Brown back then. Even his first year, they didn't have Devonta Smith. Like there's a lack of weapons. Let's just let him do what he can already do at a really elite level, and that's run the ball. And Justin Fields can do that. I mean, when he starts to take off, the guy's a 6'3", 240-pound running back, essentially, and that's big. He can make plays on the ground, and so I got to give a shout-out to the Bears coaching staff for making that adjustment, and I hope they continue to do that throughout the year because Justin Fields has been pretty impressive the last 3 weeks, and I think a large part of that is because they're not asking him to throw the ball a ton anymore. Or, well, they weren't really asking him to throw the ball that much early, but they're not asking him to only make plays with his arm and then just let David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and all those guys run. They're allowing Fields to get involved in the run game, and then when he does make plays with his arm, things are a little more opened up for him because of the threat of the run. So shout out to the Bears coaching staff on that. I agree with everything you said. But I do want to talk about the New England Patriots and this potential quarterback controversy that happened last night. What do you think about this? The way they handled the Mac Jones Bailey Zappi situation last night. Bill Belichick stated that it was always the plan to play both quarterbacks. He apparently had told the quarterbacks that before the game. He said that he told the team leadership that before the game, but there was apparently an anonymous player that reported that they didn't hear anything about it. And so clearly not the entire team was involved or heard about this decision. And I think also the optics of the way it went down. Mac Jones throws the interception, then Bailey Zappi comes in and stayed in the game the rest of the game. I think maybe it was a little weird the way that it went down. But how do you feel about this? Do you think there's a quarterback controversy? Who do you think they should use moving forward? All that stuff.
I don't think there's a quarterback controversy in the long run, at least. Although this isn't out of Bill Belichick's kind of MO. I mean, we literally saw him in the Super Bowl bench Malcolm Butler, and someone would argue that cost him a Super Bowl, and we still don't know why Malcolm Butler was benched. And, Mac, this is obviously a key injury because, Mac's been out for a bit. I think that's important to factor into. And maybe they kind of maybe there was a little bit of butting of heads here where maybe Mac felt like, he could go out and play. And maybe, the coaching staff was like, well, you're medically cleared, but like, we don't feel like on the practice field, you're back, So say, okay, let's just throw him out and see what he's got. I do think Bill's kind of, as the kids would say, capping in regards to, the interception, it was planned, even, regardless of the interception. I think the interception obviously was a catalyst for, okay, let's just pull him because, he wasn't looking too impressive at that point. And, Bailey, like I said, like we mentioned with Dak, Mac Jones hadn't played football at this point for about a month, probably a little bit over a month. So it's hard to be thrown in there, in the live, with live bullets basically going around you and to, especially with the pressure of Bailey Zappi and such. I just think in the moment they were trying to win the game. That's why they threw Bailey Zappi in because, okay, Max just doesn't have it tonight. Let's not try to force this. And, maybe Mac, and the momentum, especially the fans were chanting for Zappi. So if Mac keeps doing worse, then it just further solidifies in the fans' minds, oh, let's just play Zappi. Then, Bill's got to deal with that, even though he's going to deal with it regardless, all the, the questions. Going forward, it's tough because I don't know the health of Mac Jones. I don't know, how confident he, what percentage he is at. Let me look at their schedule. They have the Jets next. Yeah, honestly, especially if he's not 100%, I would wait. I would play maybe Zappi another game, but if Mac Jones 100%, and especially since they invested a first round pick in him, I'd throw him back out there. And if he struggles again, then maybe you throw in Zappi. But, you invest the first round pick in Mac Jones. We forget he had a really good rookie year. Like, they went to the playoffs last year. And this is still, like, a new offense for him to learn. And the fact that he missed 5 weeks as his offense probably grew and evolved and, got thrusted back in, I just don't think it's fair to fully criticize him, or Mac Jones, and say that he should be benched for Bailey Zappi. So I will say Zappi looked good, but I know that wasn't a great answer, but I would go with Zappi for the next game unless Mac Jones is absolutely 100%. Like the ankle's not an issue, and you just then I would say, okay, let's just throw him out there for a full game, and for better or for worse, just let him get that game under his belt, and then we'll evaluate from there. But I don't think there's a controversy long term.
Yeah, I'm just in the way they handled it. I'm not a fan of this. The way that game started, the crowd was chanting for Bailey Zappi. And so you've put Mac Jones out there in a situation where he's coming off of 2 wins, in a situation where this fan base still has this delusional mindset that any young white quarterback that they draft is going to be the next Tom Brady. We saw it last year with Mac Jones. And now we're seeing it again with Bailey Zappi, and it's probably even worse because Bailey Zappi's a late round pick, and so he aligns more with like the Tom Brady story. Newsflash to everybody, it's not going to happen. You're not going to find the next Tom Brady. Anyway, so yeah, I wasn't a fan of the way they handled it. You throw Mac Jones out there, and all of a sudden his own crowd is cheering against him. He throws the interception, then he gets benched, and it doesn't help that then Zappi has a great drive, and everybody's cheering for him. And I just think it just kills the confidence of your QB. I think if you were going to play both, you start with Zappy and then maybe you bring Mac Jones in later. You commit to a full half for both of them, something along those lines. Or maybe you just start with Zappy, and if he's playing well, then you just ride with him the rest of the game, and you say, well, we didn't think that Mac was fully healthy. Something along those lines. Like, I feel like you can cover for your quarterback a little bit better here and not kind of, I don't know. I just felt like they really just put him in a tough spot, and we'll see if he can overcome this and win his starting job back. And maybe that's what Bill's wanting to do, because I wouldn't put it over Bill's head. He's not the kind of guy to pat you on the back and say that you need to, that you're the guy. Like, he's going to make you earn everything. But I just wasn't a fan of the way they handled it. And I did think that Jacoby Myers, he had a quote after the game that I thought was something I really resonated with. He said, "It's tough to see somebody who works so hard get that kind of treatment," in reference to Mac. He followed up later and he clarified, not even just the coaches, but everybody, the crowd, all of it. It was an ugly situation, in my opinion. And I agree. I just think that Mac Jones didn't really get the support that he deserved in that moment for everything that he did for the franchise last year and all the work that he's put in. So regardless of whoever they go with, I think they could have just handled that a little better. And I will say, in my opinion, Mac Jones is still the better quarterback. I mean, Bailey Zappi has had his moments, but he's done nothing that I've been like, wow, Mac Jones can't do that. But Mac Jones has definitely made some plays throughout his career that I just don't see Bailey Zappi making. Now, I don't think there's like this massive gap, because I've never thought that Mac Jones had like the highest of ceilings. I've always felt like he would be a quarterback that can play well within a system, on schedule, in structure, all those kind of things. And the Patriots are one of those organizations that can do that. That's why a quarterback like Zappi or Jacoby Brissett when he was there, or Jimmy Garoppolo, or literally any quarterback that plays for them can have success. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of the way they handled it, because I don't think there was really a quarterback controversy until last night, when the Patriots coaching staff kind of made it into one. So yeah, I don't know. It felt weird, especially since the Patriots, this didn't feel like the Patriots way of removing all potential distractions and blah, 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 and whatever. So yeah, that's how I felt. If you don't have any other thoughts on that one, we got one more thing that I do want to talk about for this week, and that is we're getting near the middle of the season. And in the NFL, it happens every year. There's always a team that doesn't start out the greatest, but at some point along the way, maybe after their bye week, around midway through the year, something switches and they start to figure things out a little bit, and then they have success, and then they get hot going into the playoffs and they start to make some noise. I think the Bengals were one of those teams last year. I can't remember how many games they won at the end of the year, but around the middle of the year, they were hovering about 500. And they got some momentum towards the end of the year, especially in that Chiefs game going into the playoffs. And then, they built on it from there. So we got this list of any team that's sort of 500 or worse, not counting teams like the Texans, who are very clearly kind of out of it. So, Aaron, out of these teams, who would you bank on? I'm going to pose questions. Who would you bank on making a deep playoff run? Or, well, actually not that, because that kind of limits it. Who would you say out of these teams you could see like sort of figuring it out in the second half of the season and really potentially going into the playoffs and making some noise? We got the Patriots, Raiders, Broncos, Browns, Jaguars, and Colts in the AFC. And the NFC, we got the Commanders, Rams, 49ers, Cardinals, Packers, Bears, Buccaneers, Falcons, and Saints. These teams are all at 500 or worse, but they're not in the like super bottom category that is the bottom of the league.
I could pick one team, right?
Yeah, you can pick a couple.
Okay,
just name some teams who you could see that could make a run.
So I think the Patriots are still in this. I'm still a believer in their defense. I know it wasn't the greatest night against Chicago. Turnovers didn't help. And we just talked about the quarterback controversy, but I mean, they're still a very well coached team. They made it in last year. I would argue this team's more talented than last year's team. And we all know the coaching staff, although they are missing probably Josh McDaniels, as we've seen the offense is taking a little bit of a step back. It's not too much, not as big of a step back as we thought it would be. So I expect them to figure out its quarterback situation regardless. They always seem to find a way. That's really the only team the AFC have full confidence in. The Jags, I would have a couple weeks ago said that, but seems like kind of youth and inexperience, and they just are missing a piece or two. And then Doug Peterson, like I just mentioned, going for it a little bit too much for my liking. Other than that, I don't have. If I had to pick a third team, it'd probably be the Raiders, but we all know that I have concerns about their defense. The offense is looking really good though. And then for the NFC, it would probably just be the Niners and Bucks. Probably Niners would be, obviously my one I'm more confident in, and then Tampa Bay. In regards to making an impact at the end, it's just, I know we talk about Tampa getting a little bit older, but they still have good impact pieces. And obviously the Niners, like we just mentioned, they just need to get healthy because they have the impact pieces and they have the coaching staff, and they've done it before. They literally made the Super Bowl before with a lesser Deebo Samuel and probably a lesser Nick Bosa too. So, and no Christian McCaffrey at that time either. But those are the teams I would lean on. I want to say Saints, but Saints always find a way to screw it up. And we all know how critical I am of my Packers. So, those are it. And I know the Rams. Sorry, last one. I know people say the Rams maybe one. I just don't. I'm not sure if the offensive line's fixable, even via trade. Like I don't know if any linemen are available. So, yeah, that's why I'm just going with those 4 teams. I would say. What about you? Anyone that you think that I missed or you want to argue for?
I would argue the Jaguars, actually. I do think they've kind of gotten unlucky. They've lost some close games. I think there's some winnable games on their schedule still. I talked about how they're top 11 in both offensive and defensive EPA. So they're performing how they need to. But even like the rest of their schedule, they got the Broncos in London next week, and we have no clue if Russell Wilson's going to play. Even if he does, I think that's a winnable game. You got the Raiders. It's a winnable game. Like you got the Lions later in the year. You got the Texans. You got the Titans twice, and the Titans have looked good, but still, it's a divisional game. Anything can happen. I think there's some winnable games there. Now, do they make the playoffs? I don't know, but I think they could maybe get hot in the second half of the season. You never know. Maybe make a run. I do agree with you on the Raiders. I could see that happening because I do think they're better than their record indicates so far. Otherwise, out of the AFC, I'm not a big fan of most of the rest of these teams. For the NFC, I would argue that I think the Rams could, but that's under the assumption that based on Les Snead's track record, I think they're going to make a move or a couple moves. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they trade for a running back. I've already started to think about what a Kareem Hunt pairing would look like in that offense. That could be interesting. I think the offensive line is going to get healthier as we move closer and closer towards the midway part of the season. And I do think that there's some move to be made where they can get somebody like Eric Fisher or something that would at least provide them some sort of depth. I'm not saying it's going to completely fix the line, but if they can just improve it even the slightest bit, I think that could make a massive amount of dividends because they still have a lot of talented playmakers like Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Tyler Higbee. I think Matthew Stafford can be better. And I don't know. I really am a big fan of Sean McVay, so I'm just not going to bet against him on that. But I do agree with you on the Niners. I think once McCaffrey's fully involved in this offense and they get healthier, they're going to be a tough team to beat. And yeah, I mean, I think the Buccaneers could figure it out just for the sake of their division's not very good. But I don't think they're going to figure it out in terms of like being a true Super Bowl contender, honestly, the rest of the year, because I think they just have a lot of off the field issues going on. But also I think that's sort of overshadowing a general decline of their overall play. So yeah, that's how I feel. Well, I think this will be interesting to check back in maybe in like a couple months from now before the season's over and see if any of these teams have lived up to our expectations and really gotten hot. So we'll see.
We will indeed. But otherwise, that'll do it for us for this podcast. We'll be back, obviously, with our Week 8 picks against the spread later in the week. And as per usual, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you can like, comment, subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subs on our YouTube. We're on all podcast streaming platforms. Our main social is Instagram at ShutUpAndBallPod. And we're on Twitter and TikTok as well at ShutUpAndBall there. But otherwise, like I said, we'll see you later. And yeah, see you in week 8, y'all. Adios.